to Rick's Corner. I've got Doug Brignole back. You guys have asked about him. He's very, very good about the science of the body and the mind and how things work and what to eat and how you make the muscles grow and how they work a certain way. And today he has a subject that's kind of new to me. I mean, I know what it means, but I'm not quite sure about how you say it.
Well, what I specialize in is this thing called biomechanics.
Okay.
And basically it's the physics of the body during exercise.
Okay.
And, you know, what it boils down to is that there's certain principles that are happening, even though you don't know they're happening, every time you lift a weight. Right? There's certain things that you just take for granted. You do a barbell curl, there's things that you're complying with in order to have that be effective.
Right.
Even though you think it's pretty much a very simple, basic thing. Like when you're doing a curl, you are pulling opposite resistance.
Right.
Well, when you're doing a torso rotation with a medicine ball, you're not. Right? How many times have you seen a guy doing a shoulder rotation holding a dumbbell?
Yeah.
Well, he's not moving opposite resistance. Resistance is pulling down.
You know what?
So there's some basic principles that we have to come.
Right.
Yeah.
The dumbbell means nothing. It's not pulling away from anything.
You need to, you need to be challenged in your movement, right? Your bicep is keeping that thing from falling.
Right.
But this isn't a bicep exercise.
Right.
Your inward-outward rotation is being completely unchallenged.
So basically, you should have a cable going back and forth.
Yes, or an elastic band.
Plastic band. Okay.
So when you're doing a curl, there's some basic things that are happening, and the thing we're going to talk about today is this thing called the perpendicular lever. And what that means is that there's basically two kinds of lever. There's a parallel lever and a perpendicular lever. When it's parallel, it's neutral. When it's perpendicular, it's maximally loaded. Okay, so the example I always say is when you're at home or at the gym or whatever, put your arm on a tabletop, right? And then make your forearm go vertical. Hold as heavy a weight as you want up there, a 35, a 45, an 85-pound dumbbell, and you don't need any bicep strength to hold it as long as this thing is vertical.
It's pretty much balanced.
It's neutral. It's balanced over the elbow. This is why lampposts are vertical. This is why support beams in buildings are vertical, because it's a neutral lever.
Gotcha.
As soon as it starts to break from that neutral position and enters a semi-perpendicular position, it starts to load the bicep on the opposite side of the lean.
Okay.
All right, so now if you go all the way straight, this is now maximally, when it's perpendicular to gravity, it's maximally active, and everything in between is percentages.
Okay.
So a 45-degree angle is a 50% lever.
Okay.
So what does that mean? That means that if you have a target muscle that you want to work, you better make sure that the lever that operates that muscle somewhere in the range of motion is crossing the perpendicular position. So when you're doing skull crushers, you're on your back, you're doing triceps, right? That forearm is crossing gravity right in the middle, right? When you're doing curls, it's crossing gravity right in the middle. But when you're doing dips, it's not. That same lever, that forearm, which is operating your tricep, is mostly parallel to resistance. It's breaking parallel by a little bit,
right?
Which means it's loading the tricep by a little bit, percentage-wise.
Percentage-wise, right.
So if you're using body weight, 10, 15% of your body weight is still a lot for the tricep.
Yeah.
But the upper arm is going perpendicular to gravity, which means whatever is operating that lever is getting more work.
Which would be?
The front deltoid.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So when you're doing parallel bar dips, you're getting a whole lot of front deltoid to get just as much tricep as you'd be able to get with a skull crusher or a tricep.
Are you getting pec in that too?
With
the dips.
The dips, where you are, but not as well as you could be, because the truth is that the pectoral fibers are mostly horizontal, right? So you want the lever to move parallel to those fibers.
Okay.
When you're going back like this, you're not moving parallel to those fibers.
Not at all.
So it's helping, but it's not doing as much as it could be doing. What I do is, well, we're getting off subject a little bit, but I do this thing called a simulated dip on a cable machine. And so then I take the cables that are coming from above, and I do what would be a perfect parallel bar dip if the bars could go out and in.
If they could go out and in, and what you're doing is you're bringing the pecs together then.
Yes, I'm opening up and I'm closing, and that's what pecs do.
How about this? Dumbbell flies for your chest. You're losing something somewhere in the.
Okay, well, dumbbell flies happens to fall along the topic of our subject.
Right.
Which is, when you're doing a dumbbell press, you're keeping your forearm as a neutral lever.
Okay.
And you're keeping your upper arm as an active lever.
Okay.
So when you're doing this, you're getting no bicep, no tricep, but lots of pec.
Okay.
As soon as you open this up, you activate the bicep.
Right.
Because now it's become an active lever.
Right, because you can actually feel it move a little bit.
You've activated the bicep, you've lengthened the lever,
right.
You've increased the magnification of the resistance, but you haven't increased the resistance or the way it affects the pecs.
Okay.
So it will not change the effect on the pec. All it's doing
is adding bicep.
It's adding bicep and magnifying the resistance. So you would get the same net effect if you just kept your elbows bent as in a press position and just increased the weight.
Okay.
So there's really no advantage to doing a fly versus a press. You're better off doing a press.
All right, just say, for years and years old school, we did the bench press inclines and dumbbell flies. And Arnold and all the guys did them as well. And then we go to the cable crossover. Now, the cable crossover is a lot more resistant than the dumbbells.
Well, the problem with the cable crossover is that the traditional cable crossover, those pulleys are probably what, 10 feet apart, 8 feet apart, something like that. Mm-hmm. And so you have to do a fly with that. Well, this free motion machine that we have now, which is these arms that go in and out, that allows you to bring the pulleys in closer. Ideally, what you want when you're doing a cable crossover is you want those pulleys directly behind your elbow so that you can keep that pulley, the cable, right alongside your elbow, and that makes this a neutral lever. As long as that cable and your forearm is neutral,
meaning that it's not being used.
That means it's not active, which means the muscles that activate that are working the least amount. You don't want bicep, you don't want tricep when you're working pec. So if you can keep this neutral, it would be no different than if you attach that cable to your elbow.
Okay.
Wouldn't that be nice if you could do that? If you just had a hook back there and you could just do this and it would be all pecs.
That'd be like putting a strap around your arm and have two straps.
Right. Now listen, you know, bodybuilders do this occasionally. Women do this more often, this bench dip. You know, where they dip, you know.
Yes, I've seen.
And they call that a triceps bench dip. But if you look at the forearm, it is mostly neutral. And there's a whole lot of front deltoid in there. Right? And it's just a waste. Then you see guys putting plates on their lap to add resistance to it, and it's just a lot of nonsense. It's a lot of front deltoid, and it's very little tricep. If your objective is to work tricep, make that forearm be perpendicular to resistance. That's the key.
Wow, that's really interesting. What about when it comes to legs?
Well, it's a very good question, actually. You're reading my mind.
Yeah.
How many times have we heard someone say, don't let your knees go over your toes?
Yeah.
Ridiculous. If you don't let the knee go over the toe, it's indirectly telling you to keep your lower leg neutral. Keeping it parallel to resistance.
From your knee to your foot would be neutral.
Keeping it neutral means you don't activate the quadricep.
Right.
I mean, that's like throwing the baby out with the bathwater. It says, oh, your knee hurts, don't work your quad. Well, the only way you're going to work your quad is if that lower leg becomes perpendicular with resistance, either by way of a leg extension or by way of letting that knee go. When you do a sissy squat, you're really letting it go over your toe. All right? You're letting it go very perpendicular. When you're doing a regular squat, you're really dealing with about a 40% lever. It's only dipping forward about 60 degrees.
Okay.
Right? But when you're doing a sissy squat, you're really leaning back and you're letting that shin go way lower, and it's giving you a bigger percentage of your body weight.
Okay.
So yes, when you're doing legs or when you're doing anything, you must have that operating lever for your target muscle entering a perpendicular position somewhere in that range of motion.
There's a website called wellnessfitnessnutrition.com, and Dr. Richard Rodriguez is the CEO of the company. He's a medical doctor. He does a lot of research on drugs, on nutrition, on proteins, IGF, GH, testosterone, all that, and he has his own lab, and his laboratory tested everything he has, including his proteins and all that are top of the line, everything he has. I want you to go on the website here and go up to products and scroll down and look at the new products, look at the hot products, look at those newly released, and check out everything he has. I mean, I can't even go through everything. The website's so big. But if you go on there and look at it, I guarantee this is probably the best I've ever found, and I endorse them because they have good products, and I get their stuff, and I've had the best results and the best gains at wellnessfitnessnutrition.com. Dr. Richard Rodriguez, he's a smart man. We've had a lot of talks about the body and what makes it work, and I urge you, just go on the site and look around. I'm not telling you to go crazy. Just enjoy it and see if it's for you, because it might be. Okay, another question. What about deltoids? Because having frozen shoulders, when I have arthritis, when I do laterals, it throws my scapula and my traps into play.
Okay, here's what happens. Now, we're getting into different subjects here, so I'll touch on it briefly.
Well, I mean, how do you centralize on that one spot?
Well, here's the thing, is that there's a subject that's in my upcoming book called stretch position loading. And that basically means where in the range of motion will that muscle find more or less resistance based on this change from neutral to perpendicular, right? So when you're doing this, you're starting with neutral, you're ending with maximally perpendicular, meaning you're starting with the lightest resistance and you're ending with the most resistance.
Okay.
That's called the resistance curve, but that happens to be the opposite of the strength curve of your muscle. You're actually stronger down here and weaker up here.
Mm-hmm.
So doing a standing side dumbbell raise is not the ideal resistance curve. You're better off lying horizontally on the floor and starting with a perpendicular arm
Yeah.
and ending with a vertical arm. And in your case, you might not even be able to get it so that it's straight across, right? So that's actually why someone like you would be a perfect candidate for side cable raise. Get that cable at the same height as your hand. In other words, it's got to be an adjustable pulley.
Yeah.
Bring it up from the ground, bring it right to the height of your hand so that you're starting with resistance right out of the gate.
Right.
And someone with a locked shoulder, you don't even have to go farther than that. You can work your deltoid with that much range of motion, provided you've got resistance at the beginning.
Interesting.
If you're doing a standing side raise, not only are you not getting anything at the beginning and too much at the end, but it's also pulling you down, which is hitting your trapezius.
Yeah.
Right? If it's coming across your body, there's no trapezius in there.
Yeah.
It's completely eliminated.
Pretty interesting.
Because muscles that are on the opposite side of resistance are going to be loaded. So if it's a down resistance, what's on the opposite side is your trapezius, it's going to be loaded. But if resistance is coming from over there and it's pulling you this way, this isn't on the opposite side of a resistance that's going that way. Only your deltoid is.
How'd you figure all this out?
This is, some people are good at math and some people are good at language. And so I have just, since I was a kid, been able to understand three-dimensionally what's happening. I've got this article that's coming out right now that's very, I want to say complicated, very technical. And then I write it, and sometimes I look at this and go, wow, how did I do that? I don't know.
Yeah.
But it's a very thorough understanding that I have, and I oftentimes let a PhD in engineering or in physics double check it for me. What do you think of this? And I get some endorsement, so I know I'm on the right track.
Very interesting. You guys understand all this because it's pretty complicated. I mean, I actually get it, and then you have to apply it, of course. It's so easy not to do it right. I mean, this thing that you said, that's really got me. You're right. I've seen that.
Yeah.
The dumbbell is resisting this way and this way, not this way and this way.
Right, but the thing that we have to, as bodybuilders and as aficionados of fitness, is we have to really think outside the box and let go of some of this traditional stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, sometimes I feel like I'm talking to either a religious or a political audience that just refuses to change what they've been doing for the last 20 years because they don't want to admit they might have been doing something less than ideal for the last.
Yeah.
We have to think outside the box and we have to use science, the science we now understand, to find a better way.
Yeah. Interesting. Well, thank you.
My pleasure. It's good to be here.
Al, where can people find you if they want to write to you or talk to you?
Well, my website is dougbrignole.com or dougbrignole.fitness. And you can email me at dbfitness@aol.com. I'm on Facebook. Feel free to send me a friend request, and I'm there for you, buddy.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
I know we're going to do more shows and other subjects, but this was good to know. You're always very interesting having it. Thank you guys for watching Rick's Corner, and we'll be back with more.
It's rickdrasin.com. He is the equalizer, baby. See you next time.